Welcome back. This session is the most important session of this entire course. This is a little longer session and it has 20 most important commands. Out of all the 75 commands that we cover in this course, these 20 commands are the core commands. And if you can master these 20 core commands, that's all you need. Your Linux life will be elegant and forceful. In this session, we're going to learn the commands related to files and directories. There are four major operations on files and directories: create, edit, copy, and remove. We'll see commands about how to create files and directories, how to edit and rename these files and directories, how to copy these files and directories, and how to remove these files and directories. And finally, we'll look at how to find missing files. This is a really important activity that you have to perform. And everything related to files and directories. And at the end of all these commands, we're going to learn about a very special and unique feature available only in Linux. This is called a pipe. Let's go ahead and look at the commands first. ls, list the files and directories. Tree, show tree-like directory structure. This is a more human-friendly way of looking at files and directories compared to an earlier command, ls. The next command is touch a file or create a file. Cat, display the contents of the file. That's catalog. Mkdir, make a directory. Chmod, change mode of a file or directory. Basically, you're changing the permissions of the file or the directory. chown, change the ownership of file or a directory. ln, link to another file or directory. Now this is used to create dummy links from multiple places to the same file. The next command is mv, move a file or a directory. This command is also for renaming files and directories. Copy, copy files and directories from one place to another place. rm, remove a file or directory. This is usually a delete command in some other operating systems like Windows. wc-l, word count in terms of lines. Next, vi or vim, view a file. This is a very important command that you want to master in the long run. This is the editor of Linux, like a notepad in your Windows. You should be really good with this vi and vim command. Nano, view a file again. It's a new command for people who are not really good with the earlier command, vi or vim. It is more convenient and easy to work with. Head of a file. The head means the top 10 lines of a file. Tail of a file. The tail means bottom 10 lines of a file. More, again, display the file just like head and tail, but in a slightly different way. We will talk about it in detail. Next command related to earlier command is less command. The less command again displays a file. The less command was created as a replacement to the earlier command more. The less command has more features. So it's usually called less is more. The next command is find, to find files and directories. Now this command is going to help you a lot in Linux, especially when you forget things and file locations. And if you are good with this command, you don't have to remember the location of files or exact names of the files for that matter. The next command is grep, display lines with a keyword in a file. Now this is something that does not exist in Windows by default. It's a very powerful command. And the last construct is a pipe. A pipe, as the name suggests, it pipes the output of one command as an input to the next command. Now this is used to concatenate multiple commands one after the other. You can concatenate as many commands as you want. We will see more details about this pipe construct in this session. Now that's a list of commands. Wow, that's a very big list compared to our earlier sessions. But I promise you, by the end of this session, you'll feel really familiar and comfortable with Linux. Now let's go ahead and work on some hands-on. ls is a command to list the directories and files in a given directory. A more useful one is ls-ltrh, long listing, time sort, reverse order in human readable form. As we see more number of files in this directory, we will get more details using ls-ltrh. The same way, if there are any hidden files, ls-la. Any file that starts with a dot is a hidden file in Linux. Now in this case, ls-la, you can see a .bashrc, .cache, .gnupz, like those. You also see two other files, the first one dot and the second one dot dot. The dot in this case represents the current directory and the dot dot represents the parent directory. Tree is a command similar to ls or ls-ltrh, but tree shows are part of these details in a human-friendly visual way. Let's go ahead and see some examples to understand it better. First, tree without passing any parameters. You can see the first three files, background.sh, context.xml, helloworld.chat. And then you have the whole directory structure under T1. So T1 is a directory. Inside that you have a file in T1. That's the name of the file. Also, there is another directory T2 inside T1. So T2 again has file in T2 and T3. And T3 again has T4, another directory inside it. So that's more like a visual tree-like structure. If we go into T1, cd to T1, ls, we should see those two files, file in T1 and T2, ls-ltrh. We can see that file in T1 and T2. Let's go ahead. Tree, let's go back, cd, home directory, ls-ltrh, tree, T1. So the whole tree-like structure of the directory T1. Now this is really helpful if you have bigger directories or more number of files. So let's go ahead and switch to another directory, cd/etc, which is a very important directory. Currently we are in etc directory. Let's run a tree command on tree etc. Now you can see a much bigger tree here. So here there are a lot of files. I am scrolling backwards using my mouse. You can see a lot of files. And if you go to the bottom, it also shows you the total directories and files in it. 223 directories and 1415 files. Now, a simple trivia kind of fact here. Now, if you want to know the whole list of files and directories in this whole file system, you just do a tree /. It goes on. This is a This is going to be a longer command. It's trying to basically list out everything on this system. Let's try to see how many files and directories are there on this system. I'm going to scroll it up a little faster until this command finishes. It's going to take at least a minute. That's a full list. So you have 90,068 directories and approximately 671,821K files. So that's a tree command. It's more for the convenience of visually looking at the tree structure. Now to create a file, you will use a touch command, touch F1, F2, for file 2, file 3. You are creating 3 files here. Now let's run ls-ltrh. You can see hyphen as the first letter. A hyphen means a regular file. You can also see the size of these files is 0 bytes, which means they are empty files. So touch command is used to create a file of 0 size. There's another way to create a file using cat. Now cat single redirection. It's called a single redirection. F1, F2, F3 we have already created. I'm going to create F4. Now when you use cat instead of a touch, it will allow you to enter some content into it. So I'm entering some content into the F4 file, line 1, line 2, line 3, and when I'm done, press Ctrl D, end of data. So now you have F4 file. Now we want to see the contents of F4 file. Again, you're going to use cat this time without the redirection. You're just trying to display the contents of a file. This is a very common command to see the contents of a file. It's like a notepad in a Windows system. So observe here, cat redirection will put content into a file, whereas without the redirection, it will show the content of a file. Now, if you go back to our existing files, you have F1, F2, F3, which are 0 byte files. Now, if we do a cat on F1, and because there is no content in it, you won't see anything. The same way, cat F2, because you don't have any content in it, you should not see anything. The same thing, we have created 0 byte files here. All right. Now, as opposed to if you have some content, for example, let's look at the context.xml file you see here. If you do a cat on context.xml file, there is content in it, and that's your content you are seeing. So any file, if you want to see the content, you just cat it. Now, another way or another variation of cat command is, earlier we have used single redirection to start or put some content into F4. We already have line 1, line 2, line 3 in F4. Now, we want to append some lines, means line 4, line 5, like that. In that case, you use double redirection. Remember this? Double redirection is for appending. Single redirection is to override. So here in this case, cat F4, line 4, line 5. So these two lines, then Control D, these two lines will be appended to F4. So the earlier content will remain same, and then the new lines will be added. Now, to demonstrate a single redirection, F4, because I'm using a single redirection, it will not be appended, but everything will be wiped out, existing content from F4. So now line 6 and line 7, but because I'm using a single redirection, the earlier lines, line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4, and line 5 will be overwritten. So after this command is done, you will have only line 6 and line 7 in F4. Let's see that. So close this file, Control D. Now cat, to see the contents of the file, cat F4, that's line 6 and line 7. So double redirection, append, single redirection, overwrite. That's for viewing your files and the contents of the file. Now let's look at creating the directories. Now to create a directory, mkdir d1, d2, d3. This will create 3 directories. You can see here. The directories have a size of 4096. That's the default directory size. It does not count the contents of a directory. Let's say there is a 1 GB file inside any of these 3 directories, d1, d2, d3. It still shows 4096. So ls-ltr should not be used to identify the size of a directory. There is another command, we will talk about it. But for file sizes, it will show you definitely. And you can see the first letter for D1, D2, D3, it's D. Alright, so here ls-ltr or ls-ltrh in a human readable form of files and directories. So that's how we create it. Let's look at the permissions of a file and how to change those permissions. Any file or a directory has 3 types of permissions: read, write, and execute. And these permissions are given to a user or the owner, usually, a group that the owner belongs to, and others in that system. And the way we can see these permissions is by using ls-ltrh command. If you see it here, permissions to any file or directory, we can see it using ls-ltrh. When you see this, these 9 characters basically define all the permissions to all the users in a system for a given file or a directory. The first character we know is a hyphen or a D. Hyphen represents a regular file and D represents a directory. The remaining 9 characters tell what the permissions for all the users in the system. When you're looking at the permissions, let's say rw hyphen, art hyphen hyphen, art hyphen hyphen. Now these permissions of a given file f1, and if you see the 9 characters, these are read, write, but no execute, and then read, no write, and no execute, and again read, no write, and no execute. If you have an R, then you have read permissions. And if you have a W, then you have the write permissions. And if you have X, then you have execute permissions. If instead of a letter, there is a hyphen in that corresponding position, it means you were not given that particular permission. In this case, read is there, write is there, execute is not there. And then read is there, write is not there, execute is not there. The same way, read is there, write is not there, and execute is not there. So out of these 9 characters, the first 3 characters tell about the permissions of the owner of the file. The next three characters tell about the group members' permissions, and the last three characters will tell about the permissions of others. Now, to demonstrate this better, let's consider a set of users and groups in a Linux system. Let's say there are 6 users in a system: user 1, user 2, user 3, user 4, user 5, and user 6. Now, for the easy administration, these users are combined into groups. Let's say the first 3 users are put into group 1. The next 2 users are put into group 2 or G2. And the last user is put into a third group, G3. So what we are looking at here is the first 3 permissions are for the user, let's say user 1. The next 3 permissions are for his friends, means the group members, in this case U2 and U3. And the last 3 permissions are for everyone else in the system. That means U4, U5, and U6. All these users are treated as others. So user is the owner. Other users who belong to the owner are treated as group members. And the remaining users in the system are treated as others. So when a user tries to access a file, the operating system makes a check in the following way. Let's say the user 6 is trying to access file F1. The operating system will see which category the user 6 falls under. Is user 6 the owner? If not, does user 6 belong to the same group as the owner? If not, user 6 is treated as others. Now, based on the category of user 6, the operations are allowed or denied. Now that we know where the permissions are, let's see how to change these permissions if required. We will be using chmod to make changes to these permissions. Owner or root can change the permissions of a file. Let's say you want to give write permissions to the group members. So what you want to do here is chmod to the group members, give write permissions on file F1. The same way, to give write permissions to others, chmod write permissions to others on file F1. This is the concept behind permissions and chmod. But in real-time working, this is not usually how it's done. There is a much simpler way. Now, instead of using RWX letters, all the 9 characters are converted into hexadecimal to make it simpler. So, it will be 2 power 0, 2 power 1, 2 power 2. So, execute is 2 power 0, that is 1. Write is 2 power 1, that is 2. Read is 2 power 2, that is 4. So if anybody has all the 3 permissions, then it will be read, you have 4, write, you have 2, execute, you have 1. So if somebody has all the 3 permissions, it will be 4 plus 2 plus 1, that's 7. So we can represent all the permissions using 1 digit 7 instead of 3 letters RWX. In the case of file F1 that we are discussing, it has read, write, but no execute. Then it will be 4 plus 2, that is 6. Then for the group members, only read permissions, but no write, no execute. So that will be 4 plus 0 plus 0, that will be 4. Then for the others on file F1, only read, but no write and no execute. Again, it will be 4 plus 0 plus 0, which is 4 again. So you can say 644. So just by using these 3 digits, you can actually represent all the permissions of all the users on a given file or directory. Apart from 644, the other popular permissions is 755. 7 means 4 plus 2 plus 1, which means you have all the permissions. Then 5 is 4 plus 1, which is read and execute. And then again 5, read and execute. So 755. So these permissions represent you have all the permissions, 7. Others can see your file and execute it, but they cannot modify, that is 5. Now this is the usual permissions you will see for most of the scripts on Linux. On the other hand, configuration files in Linux are usually given 644 permissions. If you see 644, 6 is 4 plus 2, which means read and execute. 4 is 4 plus 0, which means read, not write, no execute. 4 again, read. That means the owner can read and write the file. Others can just read the file but cannot modify or write to the file. And nobody, including the owner, has permissions to execute. Now this is usually a configuration file, like a text file. So there will not be any script or program for execution. So nobody needs execute permissions on the configuration files. The other type of permissions is 755. Let's say you have a script, myscript.sh. You want to give read, write, execute for yourself and only read and execute for everybody else. They can see how beautiful your script is and they can execute it, but they cannot change anything in it. Isn't it great? So chmod 755 myscript.sh. The same way, if you want to give 644 permissions to one of the configuration files, chmod 644 myfile.com. Now let's go ahead and run some hands-on. Now ls-ltrh, we have talked about the permissions read, write, execute, read hyphen execute, read hyphen execute. Now sometimes you may want to give permissions to a group members. So here we're going to say chmod to the group, give write permissions on the file, let's say f1. Right now the f1 does not have write permissions to the group. So we're going to give it. So ls-ltrh, we will simply list out f1 file only, not the rest. So you can see write permissions for the f1 file. You can list the whole files also. ls-ltrh. Now f1 has write permissions. Compare it with f2 and f3, which do not have group write permissions. The same way, ls-ltrh. Let's create some other directory structure. mkdir y1, inside it create y2, inside it create y3. Because this is a path, we're giving hyphen p. Let's create it. We can create hyphen path z1, inside that create z2, inside that create z3. Alright. Let's ls-ltrh. We have the directories x1, y1, and z1 along with d1, d2, d3. Let's do it 3. So you can see the x1, x2, x3 directory tree and y1, y2, y3 directory tree, z1, z2, z3. Now using chmod, you can give permissions to ls-ltrh. Using chmod, we can give permissions to both directories and files. Now if we want to change permissions of the whole directory, we are going to give -r recursively, write permissions to the group on z1. Alright. Now that will change the permissions of z1 You now have write permissions for the group. Let's go to Z1. See what do we have here. For Z2 also, the group has write permissions. CD Z2. For Z3 also, the group has write permissions. Now compared to this thing, let's go back. Now if you see ls-l x1 and x2 inside, this does not have write permissions. chown. I have included this command here to give you a full list of commands related to files and directories. But we need to have understanding of some more commands of Linux before we can understand this chown, especially commands related to multiple users and ownership of files. So for now, we're going to hold this command for a while until we finish the commands related to user creation section. And then we will revisit it again. Now, if you want to finish the explanation of chown now itself, you can jump to extras section of this course and finish it there now itself. Now from files and directories, let's jump on to what are called links now. A link, as the name suggests, is a link to another file or a directory. So we can create pointers, or other words, links to files and directories. For example, we have file F1 here. Now we want to create a link to F1. So the way to do it is ln-s, it's called a soft link. Now the link name, let's say we are creating a link to F1, the destination, and the link name, link to F1. Alright, so link to F1 is the name of the link. You can see it here, ls-ltr. Now you can see link to F1 pointing to F1. That's one thing. And the very first letter of this link is L. Earlier we have seen hyphen for files, D for directories, and now we are seeing L for links. These are the three things that you will remember. So again, ls-ltrh, that's link to F1 pointing to F1. Now a link, as the name itself says, it's a link. Now the same way, links can be created to directories as well. So let's create a link to directory link, this time again a soft link. This time let's say D1, let's say link to D1. Last one. So you will have a link to D1. So links are just pointers to either files or directories. You can remove the links without affecting the file or directory that it is linking to. Now let's say you want to change the name of a file or directory. Let's say you want to change F1 to F11. Let's say you will call it move F1 to F11. So now F1 is moved to F11. So F1 will not exist anymore. You can see it here. F11 is the new file. Now you will also observe that the link name linked to F1 is showing it in red. Now the reason it's showing in red compared to earlier color is F1 does not exist anymore. So basically your terminal is telling you that this link may not function. So any operations that you perform on a link may not work. These are kind of zombie links. So you are pointing to somewhere, and the destination does not exist in this case. So we looked at move command. Now the same way, directories also can be moved. Let's move one of our previous existing directories. So move, in this case, D1 to D11. So D1 will be renamed to D11. Let's FNLTRH. Alright, so D1 does not exist anymore. It's changed to D11. Let's move on to a copy command to create copies. A move command basically changes the name. So the original file does not exist. Now sometimes you just want a copy. So now copy D2, or let's say file we are working on, F2 to 200. Let's say file 2 copy to F200. So now F2 and F200, both of them exist. F200 is a copy of F2. You can see F2 and F200. Instead of LTRH, you can just run ls-l h. It will show both the files at the same location. So F2 and F200, two copies exist now. Now the same way, a directory can be copied, but we have to do it recursively. So cp-r this time, without when you are doing it for a directory. So D2 should be copied to D100 now. Earlier we copied F2 to F200, that is a file. Now this is a directory. Now if you don't use -r for a directory, it will throw error. Let's say 2000. Let's say without -r we are trying to do it. Let's see the error we get. You see, cp -r is not specified, omitting directory D2. So if you don't specify -r, which means recursively, copy command will just skip it. So in this case, it's errored out, so you will not find D2000 ls-ltrh. So there is no D2000. So that's your copy command. The last command on files and directories is to remove files and directories. So we're going to remove rm-rm file. Let's say a copied file will remove F11, F200. You can remove multiple files in a single command. So F11 instead of F200, let's create F2. Let's remove these two. So ls-ltrh, you should not see F2 and F11. Alright, those two are gone. You don't see them here anymore. Now the same way, you can remove the directories also, but you have to give -r. Just like copy command, rm command also expects you tell it to recursively remove the directories. In this case, let's say rm-r, let's say we want to remove D11 and D2. It removes everything. The same way, now let's see this file, ls-l .th. So your directories D11 and D2 are gone. So that's about removing the files. cat-n definitely gives you the numbers, but without the output, sometimes we just want to have the numbers. So word count wc is another command that gives letters, words, and lines. Before we go there, let's do a wc-lines from sample file. So basically you have 24 lines here. The word count can be used for other purposes also. Without hyphen L, if you say, it will give you lines 24, words 250 words in this file, and total characters 1223. The common, more useful command is the number of lines in a file.
Let's see the Linux editor, VI or Vim. We'll try to see the basics of Vim here in about 10 minutes. Now, before we actually get into the execution, let's see the commands. This is how you open a file using Vim, the Vim command and any file name. Then there are three modes in Vim. Each mode is expected to perform certain activities. When you log in, you are in command mode, or when you open a file. Then if you want to put some data into your file, you get into insert mode by pressing I on your keyboard. Now once you are done inserting stuff into it, you want to save and close by using a EX mode, execute mode. And to enter into the EX mode, you press colon. These are the three modes that you have to remember. Now pictorially, this is where you are, command mode. You press I, you get into insert mode, which means you will be able to insert any data. From insert, you press escape, you get back to command mode. Then from command mode, you press shift colon, you go to EX mode. So whether you are in insert mode or EX mode, to get back to command mode, you press escape. It sounds a little complicated, but it is not. So if you're confused, all that you have to do is press escape multiple times and you're back to command mode always. So the summary, if you want to insert something, go to insert mode and insert it. And if you want to save, close, control S, all this kind of stuff, go to shift colon and execute those commands. We're going to see some of those commands here. Now this is another representation of the same thing. You go to command mode first. You go to input mode here. By pressing escape, you go back to command and you can press shift colon. You come to EX mode where you can perform a search and replace. You can insert and save file and execute shell commands. We will see that in a moment. And then press escape, you are back. Now this is where you navigate. Now your arrow keys may not work on Vim. Many of the Linux and Unix systems you might have problems. So this is something that always works. So H, J, K, L, they are in the middle of on your keyboard, so they are next to each other. H to left, L to right, J downwards, K upwards. By pressing these keywords, you can navigate through a file. You can navigate faster by Control F, page by page, and navigate backward by Control B, page by page. And if you want to go to the end of the file, Shift G. Now those are commands basics. Now this is something that you will need: cut, paste, and copy paste. Let's look at copy paste first. YY is yanking, it's called. So it will copy one line. If you want to copy n lines, you press n first, the number. Let's say, for example, you want to copy 5 lines from the current cursor position. You press 5 first, then YY. That will copy 5 lines. And then you have to do a paste. I think here I did not give the paste. You navigate to the corresponding line and you do a paste, P. The same way here, cutting n lines and paste. So let's try to quickly see how these things work. So here, cut paste, I forgot to mention P here, so we will do that. We'll see that in our execution. So going back, starting from the beginning, Let's open a file. Here I am on a Unix or Linux system. To be specific, I am on a Ubuntu system here. What current working directory is /temp. Let me create a file. Touch file 1. That's your file. You can see file 1 here. Alright. I'm going to open that file using Vim. Vim file 1. Now that's opens a Vim editor. Now you have to see at the bottom here. That's what you will usually focus on. And on the right side you will see your cursor position. So let's enter some lines. Now to enter some lines, we know we have to get into what we call the insert mode. And to get into the insert mode, you press I. So I'm going to press I here on keyboard. So when I press I, you can see this mode changing here at the bottom. Insert. Now we are in insert mode. Now you can insert anything you want. Let me insert a couple of lines. Line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4, line 5. Now while that inserted it, I want to save these things. But to have saving, it requires that you need to EX mode. Now to any mode you can do only by through command mode. So here from insert, I'm going to get back to command mode by pressing escape, then go to EX mode by pressing shift colon. So on the screen I'm pressing escape. Now this is gone. I'm on command prompt. Let's say I'm not sure which mode I am. I just press escape multiple times. You can see it here. You can see the escape being pressed here. Now let's move to EX mode. So I'm pressing shift colon. Now you can see colon here at the bottom. Anything you type is a command. Now I'm going to write this file using W and quit this file after I save it. So WQ. That's it. That's saved my file. I can view the file now without editing. Cat file 1. That's my file. Now let's open that file again, cut some of the content and paste it somewhere else. So Vim file 1. Now I'm navigating through this file. My current cursor position is here. Alright, now I want to navigate to 1 at the top. So I'm going to use HJKL. So K will take me to the above. So K again, K again, K again. Now I want to travel left. So H, 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 H. I want to travel down. J, 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 J. I want to travel right. L, 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 L. That's it. Now let's go back to 1 and change it to 9. So travel up. K, 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 K. That is going to travel you up. And now you need to edit it. Editing is the next one. So I need to remove that 1 and then replace it with 9. Now to remove something, you're going to use X. So if you press X, it will delete. Now the X has to be pressed in command mode. Now we are in command mode. Your navigation happens in command mode. Or if you are not sure, just press escape. You are in command mode. X. I'm pressing X. 1 is gone. Now I will move on to insert mode by pressing I. Now I'm in I. Go to the location that we want. Alright. Now press 9. You are inserting. That's it. Escape. Shift. Colon. Write W. That is save. Quit. So you edited the file cat file 1. That's run. Now let's edit again. Copy paste some of the lines. So I open my file. I want to cut the first 2 lines and paste it at the bottom. So DD is to cut. So 2DD, let's cut, navigate, coming down, P, paste. Let's paste it. So cut and paste. The same way now, I want to copy paste, yanking YY. Right? So 2 YY, I've copied it. Go to the location where I want to copy. Now this time I want to copy here below line 5 and press P as pasted. I'm done with all the editing. Escape, which means I'm back to command mode. Shift colon, I want to go to EX mode and save it. Close it. WQ at the bottom. Enter. I'm out of the file. Let's watch the file. Cat file 1. That's a new file. So that's your quick Vim for your survival.
So now we have seen how to create files, create directories, rename the files and directories, or move the files and directories using mv command. Then create copies of the files and directories using cp and cp-r, and remove those files and directories using rm and rm-r. Now the next common activity we usually perform is edit an existing file. So let's see the list of files and see the tools that we have for editing the files. So in this case, I'm going to keep the sample file as it is. Let's create another file for editing purposes. So clear it. So cat f1 I'm creating because this is a new file. Cat will allow me to create enter lines. This is a new file. Line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4. Control D. So now see the contents of file cat f1 for line 1, line 2, line 3. Now I want to edit it. Now the cat command will not allow you to edit at all. Either it can overwrite an existing file and its content, or it can only append if you are using double redirection. But it cannot edit, allow you to edit. So we have two commands for that, vi and nano. You'll see both. Vi is the command, or vim this time, f1. Now this opens up the file in an editable window. Now instead of line, I can change it to abcd, let's say. So that's changed. Save it, close it, exit. Now if you see cat f1, it's changed. Now Vim is an old editor. The problem with vi or vim, now Vim or vi is also another command. Vi is also used. So this time instead of abcd, let's say I will say x5z123, escape, semicolon, wq, exclamation, exit. So cat f1, the second line is changed. Vi is an old command. A variation of vi is vim. But the problem with both these is the arrow marks or arrow keys on your keyboard will not work with this thing. They are pure Linux system. So a better, more modern version of editor has come up. That's called Nano. So Nano F1, the main difference being the arrow keys working on it. So Nano F1, it also opens an editor. You can use arrow marks and also the delete and backspace, just like your Windows. So I'm going to delete this thing. So if you are not comfortable with VI, I would recommend going with a Nano. Okay, that's done. Once this is done, Control O to write it out, F1, and Control X to exit. Cat F1. So we removed the two lines. So either you can use VI or VIM, they both are same. Or in Nano, if you want to use your arrow keys, backspace, and delete like Windows. That's for editing. Now there are a couple of other commands to view the contents as companions of cat command. So cat sample one again. So there are 20 lines. Now let's say I don't want to see all the lines. I just want to see the top or bottom or something somewhere in middle of this file. So you have commands related to head. So head sample file shows you the top 10 commands or 10 lines, sorry. The same way tail sample file shows you the bottom 10 lines. Now instead of 10 lines, you can see any number of lines you want. Let's say you want to see only the first line, head -1 sample file. That's your first line. The same way, if you want to see 5 lines, the top 5, head -5 sample file. That's top 5 lines. The same way, tail -on, the last line, that's an empty line, or tail last 2 lines. You want to see the last 5 lines, tail -5, last 5 lines. All right. Now, the head and tail to see either at the beginning of the file or at the end. Now, if you want to see something in the middle, all right, there's another command, sed. We will talk about it later. Another set of commands to see the contents of a file is more and less commands. Now, the reason why these two commands are required is the deficiency in cat command. Now, the cat command, if you say, let's copy it here. So the cat command, if you see, it displays everything. And sometimes if the file is too long, the cat command basically displays the whole file till the end. So we may want to browse through a file line by line. Let's create the same sample file multiple times. Cat, this thing, redirect into more sample file.md. Now I'm using double redirection here. So basically it creates a more sample file once. We're going to execute the same command. Let's do history. So I'm going to execute the same cat command here. Copy, paste it again. So it will append to existing. Now if we see cat on more sample file, there are more lines. Now here you have to, if you have to look from the beginning of the file, you have to scroll back this whole thing. Now that sometimes may not be really efficient. For example, let's say you have a very long file with 100 pages. If you use a cat command on a file with 100 pages, you have to browse, scroll back to the last 99 pages. That's a really messy thing, especially in Linux terminal. That's why you need more. For more, the more sample file that we have created. Now this will open it in a browsable window. So if you see here, it says more 52%. So basically it's available 52% still. So only half of it is open. Now to move to the next page, you press space. That's next page. And also because this is the last page, you have exited. Now I'm going to run the same cat command again about 5 times just to increase the number of pages in this. So cat sample file, this is the third time we will paste it. Copy it again. So we'll paste it about 5 times. So that will make the file about 5 to 6 pages. Now remember, we are using the double redirection, which will append the sample file content to more sample file content. 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. Let's go. Now let's do a quick check on the number of lines. wc-l, the more sample file, 168 lines. Obviously, you can't see it in a single page, so you'll have to scroll from the first page to last page. Now, if you do a cat command on this, you will not be shown the first page, but you will be shown the end of everything. So that's the last page. So you can see cat-n more sample page. Let's do that. This is about 168 files. You can scroll up to go to the beginning or the first line. Now this is very inefficient. Sometimes it's not even possible to scroll to the beginning because the file is so big. Now this problem you will come across when you are working with log files. Log files are huge, so you have to be able to scroll through them to check page by page. That's when your more command comes into the picture. More the sample files here are more sample file. So now you have opened 14%. That's the first page. To move to page 2, press space. That's the second page. Again, press space. Third page. Press space again. Fourth. Space again. Fifth. Space again. Sixth. Space again. 7. That's the end of the file. Now the problem with more is you can press space to move forward, but there is no way to move backward. Let's see what I mean. More the sample file. And let's say this is the first page. Now I move to second page. If I want to move back, there's no way to do it. That's a limitation of more. That's when the next command was introduced. The less command. It's opposite of more. It's more like a reference to the more command. So less, again the same file, more sample file. Here also to move forward, space, space. Now to move back, you can use Control B. That will take you backward. You see, you are at line 2, line 3, line 4 again. Now let's do it again. Space, 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 space. Now you are at the end of the file. Now you want to move backward. Control B, Control B, Control B, Control B, Control B. That's page by page. We are moving backwards. Now to exit, the same again, Q, and you will exit. So space to move forward, Control B to move backward, and Q to exit. That's your less command. The next set of command, the next command for related to files is a find command. Now this is a very useful command. Remember, once in a while you don't really remember the locations of the files, especially when you're working on projects with multiple servers. It's not possible to remember the file locations. It's not like your laptop. Sometimes you log into a new server and you're trying to find a configuration file. You don't really know the location. That's when you need this command. This is an extremely useful command. Make sure you pay attention. Let's say you want to find a file F1, or let's find out something that we already have. Right, let's run this tree command. Now we know we have x3 directory inside x2, which is inside x1. Right? This is something that we already know. Let's try to find out x3 using the find command. That's a directory in this case. we can find files and directories also. So find from the current directory and everything inside it, or find inside x1 the directory, a name x3, enter. You can see x1 slash x2 slash x3 it found a file. The same way, find in the current directory a name f1, it found f1. And we also have another file f1 under Linux commands .git directory objects f1. We did not see that, but it's there. We did not know f1 existed there. The same way, you can find z3 hyphen name, find from the current directory everything inside it hyphen name z3. So there is a directory. Now if you try to find something that doesn't exist, you just get an empty output. Basically says there is no such thing. Now to demonstrate this a little more, especially when you have multiple files, let's create a sample file under x1 directory. So touch under x1 sample file the x1.md under x1 under x2 sample file under x2.md, then x1, x2, x3 sample file under x2.md. Let's run a tree. We can see the sample file at 3 different locations under x1, under x2, and under x3. Now let's assume we don't know this file. x1, x2, x3. The third file is wrong. We'll go ahead with it. So find in the current directory and all the subdirectories hyphen name sample star. The star basically means everything that starts with sample. So let's do this. So we found x1, x2 sample file, x1, x2, x3 sample file. Under x1 there is a sample file. Under Linux commands directory there is a sample file. And then under current directory also there is a sample file. Now we have searched for sample star. So anything that starts with sample is picked up here. So that's a good way to find out where your files are. Now grep is a command to pick the lines that have a given keyword. Let's use the same sample file again. If you see in this file, there are certain words that repeat or exist. For example, line is a word that exists in all the lines. You have line 2, line 3, line 4. The same way, if you see ABC, that's a keyword that exists at multiple places. Then if you see nCodeIT, that also exists at multiple places, but sometimes in capital letters, other times in small letters. Then there is a other keywords. So let's say we don't really know whether a keyword exists in this or not. Now obviously you can open a file and skim through the file, read through the file to understand or to find out if a keyword exists or not, but that's not really efficient. Let's say you want to see all the lines that have the keyword nCodeIT in it. So I'm going to use grep the keyword, in this case nCodeIT, from the file sample file. Now this should give you all the lines that have nCodeIT. Now you can see nCodeIT only at one line. Let's actually open the file. So you can see nCodeIT on line 2. On line 7 also you have nCodeIT, but that's all in capital. Our command, grep command, should have ideally picked it up, but it did not. Let's see the reason. So when you say grep nCodeIT from the sample file, it does not pick up anything which is not in small case letters. So the case is important here. So grep command is case sensitive in general. Now if you want grep command to ignore the case, which is most common uses, grep -i, ignore the case. Now it will pick up all the words which are nCodeIT irrespective of the case of each of those letters. Let's see what it means. Sample file. Now there are two lines which have nCodeIT. Now the same way, grep -i. Let's pick up all the lines that have ABC in it. Sample file. So there is only one line that has ABC in it. Now grep all the lines that have line word in them. Pretty much everything should be picked up now. You see, line is available. Oh, line is available at multiple locations. You can see the color also. And because we have given -i, line, whatever it is, whether it's small, capital, anything, it gets picked up. Now let's say we want the list. Grep -l grep -l nCodeIT sample file. It basically just lists out the file. Now this is for one file. Now it's possible that you may want to search through a group of files. So let's see how it goes on. And we will create a structure for mkdir -p x1 x2 x3. So we want to create, let me see. So we have x1 x2 x3. Let's copy the sample file everywhere. Sample file. Let's copy it under x1. That is done. Copy the same sample file again under x2 also. Copy the same sample file again under x1, x2, and x3 also. So at each level, we have the sample file. You can see the sample file here under x1, under x2, under x3 also. All right. Now let's say we want to find out nCodeIT keyword in all the files under x1. So grep -i, ignore the case, recursively include the subdirectories as well. For the keyword nCodeIT under the directory x1. You see? So we got from x1, x2, x3 sample file in line 2, and in the same file we have in line 7 also. The same way x1, x2 also there is another file, line 2, line 7 we got. The same line 2, line 7 we got in other file. So this is basically used when you want to find out all the lines and all the files inside a directory which have a specific keyword. Now sometimes you do not want the actual lines, but you just want the files that have the given keyword. So in this case, grep -l just list the files, search recursively for the keyword nCodeIT in x1. So you will get all the files which have the keyword nCodeIT. These are the three files. Now we come to a stage where you have to understand a very important construct of Linux. It's called a pipe. Now this is not available in Windows, but it's available on Mac, Mac being almost same as Linux. So pipe is just like the name suggests, is a pipe. Let's see what it is. Cat sample file. This will display all the content. Now ideally it will display everything to the terminal or your display. Now instead of display, we can send the output to another command using what is called a pipe. This vertical bar, usually above your enter key on your keyboard, is called a pipe. So cat sample file.md, the output is piped to the next command. Let's use grep nCodeIT. Now this command is pretty same as grep nCodeIT from sample file.md. Now you may say why we need grep at all, or why we need pipe at all. The grep is doing everything. But let's see another command, you will understand. You don't always do cat. So ls-ltr h. Now this is your general output, right? Now you want all the files that have sample keyword in the file name. So you're basically looking for sample file md, more sample file md. ls-ltrh, as we know, any output from any command can be piped to the next command. In this case, grep for the keyword sample. So you got all the files which have sample keyword in their name. Now instead of name, you can actually grep for something else also. ls-ltr, grep for something called Linux. So there's only one file that has Linux. It's just not just the file names, we can grep for anything. You have learned the most commonly used commands in Linux in this session. It's a little longer than other sections. I'm really sorry about it, but I'm sure you have enjoyed it. This is also the session that definitely requires practice, even if it is just for 5 minutes. So go ahead, start practicing. That will be all in this session. I'll see you in the next one.